So we're going to be kind of doing a recap or post-mortem of the
I'll be
Supplying
back.
Atlantis map. And I'm hoping for this to be a learning experience for both myself as well as you all. Um, the plan is to take the VOD from this and clip parts of it together for a YouTube video as well. So I'm going to try to make it fairly educational. Of course, open to shenanigans as well, though. There's definitely a lot of stuff we can take away from this. Starting in our starter base here, I made a vital mistake, a fatal mistake that I shouldn't have made, although I didn't really know I was making it at the time. Um, is to an extent, I did not leave myself. We did not leave ourselves enough room here. There was room obviously to expand. We did get our 4 columns of smelting and some steel. So it's not like I trapped myself in too much. We did have all this room without having to like move any major rail or anything. But if we wanted to expand this even further, there really isn't room to do so. But what actually did cause an issue room-wise was I didn't leave enough room for train unloading. I didn't really take train unloading into account here. So as it is, these fit, but they're very close together, and it's a little bit convoluted. Like, this is very close here to the main line. And on top of that, because of the limited space, we actually had to do some weird shenanigans here where they had to put the stacker over here and then, like, cut this line to force the trains to actually use the stacker because this is the only place it would fit. So it's a little bit wonky in that regard. Now I could have just done smaller trains. I could have done like 1-4-1s or even like 1-2-1s or something, which I suppose could have helped. And then these were of course added later. The plate trains, those were added much later once we had our at outpost smelting set up. So we covered the smelting. Not too much wrong with it aside from the space here. Circuits and stuff, we did leave room to expand. We just didn't really end up doing that. Honestly, the starter base is okay. I didn't leave a ton of room. This was never meant to be like a big science base. It was kind of meant to just get us to a rocket and like 1 or 2 sciences after that. And then pump out some items to build like an initial make everything to then build the mega base, or just build the items for the mega base. Now it is starting to get very you can
I'll
actually
be
see on the
back.
map here the difference in you can see these are just straight clean and then blah blah, blah and it just gets all goofy over here. This was like my really hatched together make everything. Yeah, got upgrade so we could do science. That's true. So we later decided to do more science. Now, this is a trend for me. I never really build proper make everythings or malls or whatever you want to call it, hubs. So this is fairly typical. It always seems to happen this way. It did work. It just took a little while for it to actually do much. Now it was upgraded. This whole thing was upgraded and kind of thrown together for more science because we did end up wanting to do more science. I suppose the lesson here is I should have planned to do more science from the get-go. Knowing that I would need at least like several bot speeds. So I think that I should have planned for more science than what I initially built. And as Rex says in chat, yeah, basically a lot of these problems could just be solved by leaving more space. So for the main starter base here, well, really the encompassing lesson for this entire thing is the very basic but extremely important principle: just leave more space. And that's just, you know, I played for so long, I should know that. I do know that. I do it to an extent. I certainly do it more than I used to. I do it more than other people, than, someone who's maybe newer to the game and doesn't know to do that. But it could still be done even more. And I really should have. Now, to be fair, I mean, this is kind of not a great excuse, but it's a little bit of an excuse. I was a little bit limited because we started on an island and we had to landfill a lot. It's basically everything here you see from like this point forward was landfilled. So I was a little limited. I probably still would have built the same way even on an unlimited non-water map. So it's not a great excuse, but at the time that did factor into it. So starter base, okay, it worked. We did launch some rockets from it. I don't know how much, of course, because the devs took it away for some unknown reason. Okay, so moving on, the main issues come in regards to the Megabase. I've gone over this. If you've watched any, and for those of you watching the clip together version of this on YouTube, if you watch my Megabase tutorial series, I use this map multiple times in multiple episodes for examples of issues. We're going to kind of go over those again here. There were a lot, and there are a lot of issues with this base and my Megabase builds. I think I was impatient, very rusty with building Megabases, and I suppose lazy as well, because I just didn't want to landfill more space. So there's really just so many issues. First off, space again, and this is even more relevant for the Megabase, because the lack of spacing between builds, and particularly between train junctions and on the main line, is a massive problem. Like, this just crippled us for a while. It's running okay now because we've done a lot of tweaking, but it was just a complete traffic jam basically all the time, up until we did a lot of fixes and changes. The rail is still a complete mess. What we actually ended up doing is making it so trains only go to their stops when a resource gets below a certain amount, with some circuit stuff and setting the train stop limit. So that just generally reduced the trains on the network massively, but up until that point, it was a complete disaster. And the rails themselves are still a complete disaster. So Aeodin has a question. Rail spacing, if we ensured that a full train length was present between junctions, would that have helped? It would have helped, but it wouldn't have solved things completely. I would be far more comfortable with like multiple train lengths between junctions. It would have helped from what we had, but ideally I would want like several train lengths between junctions. So basically, like for example, this is a main junction here. This is the first one. Ideally, I would, and back in my like actual mega basing days when I wasn't rusty, I would have built like this junction, and then none of this would have been here, and like the next junction over would have been here, and then the next one over would have been like these. Now, even that doesn't necessarily fix it. There's other problems with this, which I touched on in episode 5, I think, of my Megabase series. Is having everything on one single line and mostly going in one direction. That's the other issue that we had here. And then Foxfiend, how you doing, by the way? You say, so you need another couple lines of rail and possibly alternate routes. Yes, especially the alternate routes, I would say, is the most important. To answer both your question and Mikey's, the having a 4-lane system would have helped to some degree, but it would have... I went over this again in my episode 5 of the Megabase thing, is it would have only helped to some degree unless we did a very large amount of tweaking with it for the trains to actually utilize all 4 lanes. It would help just because it would allow more traffic, but the trains, without a lot of player tweaking, like forcing them to use a lane, aren't necessarily going to be smart enough to use, like, to evenly distribute themselves on 2 lanes each direction, unless you make them do that, like meaning that they can only turn into a build or from out of a build from one lane or the other. So it would help, yes, it would help. It wouldn't hurt, I don't think. And then the main thing also is the alternate routes, and or just putting builds elsewhere that didn't all go through one junction. Like maybe if we had a couple more of the builds down here that just went to the make everything rather than like 95% of the things all coming through this junction in one form or another. So you can kind of see this illustrated. Like this is just one train waiting, but you can see it was waiting there for like a good several seconds. So you can imagine if there was 3 or 4 times this amount of traffic, we would very easily have a traffic jam. This would be another example starting. And so here, there you go, guys. Here you go. This is a great, this is starting to show an example. And this is like a light version. It was way worse. But this is kind of a mini version of what was happening with the traffic. Just imagine this like in all directions. So, yeah. This is a good illustration of the problems. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. The other thing, and this is a personal preference thing. I know there's going to be some arguments on this. Okay, and again, I don't think there's a right and wrong thing to do, way to do things in Factorio, but in my opinion, the intentional and accidental addition of so many loops in this map has caused several issues. I suppose in 1 or 2 cases it helped, but generally I think it hurt more things than it helped. We saw at least one, probably several occasions where a train did something just absolutely unbelievably stupid because it had the ability to do so via a loop. Now part of it is just due to the way I built. This map was obviously, like, you can build with a loop. And I suppose still make it work, but I did not plan right. I did not plan for a loop. It kind of just happened, which is part of the problem. Used frequently, that is something that you should always try to avoid. That is a very good point as well. Simon says a big issue with this T-junction here is that both left turns are used frequently, so this should obviously be avoided quite a lot, if possible. Can you give your opinion on bidirectional versus unidirectional trains? So single-headed versus double-headed trains? I think they both work. I think they require a very different type of building. So, obviously, single-headed trains are going to require either... Well, actually, not even a shunt would work. They're going to require a pull-through, obviously, because they can only go one direction. And then a loop, basically, essentially, to get... It requires a loop. Which, if you plan for that and build accordingly, it can work. I've looked. It made multiple bases in my base tour, in my Megabase tour series on YouTube. I've looked at multiple bases that use single-headed trains, and they work completely fine. Double-headed trains, I prefer, because I just like being able to not have to build a loop. I just find that easier to build with most of the time without having to consider that. The other thing with double-headed trains, so I will mention this. I will say double-headed trains have a slight advantage in if game performance is not a problem for you, or like lightning fast trains. And the reason I say this is because if you build double-headed trains, you can do either option. You can either have them pull through and do loops, or you cannot, and you can just have them go back out the way they came from builds and not do loops. The disadvantage is, one, you're having more train entities because you're having, you know, like double the locomotives basically. So that will eventually, if you have enough of them, add, you know, to the game performance bog down. But if that's not an issue to you, then no worries there. And because there's more like things on the train, it's going to be slower to accelerate because there's obviously more weight to it. But if neither of those is really a concern to you, then I would say double-headed trains are just a win-win, really, because then you can just do whatever you want. Trains are easier to set up. Single-headed trains are harder, but can be more efficient. Yeah, I think that's a great answer from Hopewell. So that again, he says, double-headed trains are easier to set up, which I would agree with, which is why I use them a lot. But single-headed trains can be more efficient. However, they are harder to use. So is the in-game of Factorio after launching your first rocket is to just see how many rockets you can launch per minute? Tokdas or Tokdates, it's whatever you want it to be, which is the great thing. It can be however many rockets you can launch per minute. It can be per science amount per minute. It can be something entirely different. Like in this series, it was not based on rockets or science per minute. It was based on building stacks of items total, not at a per minute rate. But it was, so for this, we needed 474 stacks of every single item in the crafting menu, and that was our goal. So the nice thing is you can make it kind of whatever you want it to be. Is this where you keep all your stacks of everything you were building for the achievement? Yes. So to demonstrate, we have a combinator here where we set stacks. I'm going to bump this to like 485 for now, or 500. I don't know how much we have storage for. And then this changes and sets requests on all these buffer chests. So yes, this is our storage system. This is where we stored everything, all the stacks. Now, anything with a light means it was fulfilled. Everything was fulfilled. We were done until I just increased the stacks by 10. So now things are starting to crank again, starting to go on. You can see the bot craziness because we have to fulfill all these requests. So there's that, and then we ended up having to expand the storage over to here. And this is kind of a revamped version of it that Hopewell made. So you can see it's a pretty big bot disaster when I turn everything on completely. So that storage blueprints on Discord seems like a nice in-game task for a next playthrough. It's not, I don't think. I think the better one to give you would be Hopewell's. I think it's more easily changed, although I'm not really sure which one to actually copy from it, to be honest. This one's even more confusing to me than the other one. So I'm not sure. I could just give you the big one. It certainly works. It's just harder to expand. Like, it absolutely works. We used it for like 95% of the playthrough. It was just a bit harder to expand, I think, than Hopewell's. I can make a blueprint of this fairly quickly here. For anyone who wants it. I don't know exactly what I need from it. I mean, I know I need all that. I don't know if I need these things. I don't know if this was for the light display. I mean, I guess we can just copy the whole thing. It doesn't really matter. You need a solid 2 combinators per row and one. Okay. Okay, so Horwitz's blueprint is in the Discord, I guess. In the blueprint channel. What is my artillery range? I feel like I shouldn't answer this question. I don't know. I don't have the remote. Like an actual remote. I don't think it says, does it? In my actual thing. Yeah, not really, does it? Oh, shooting range? Maybe it does. 560 plus 504. So 1064 artillery is right here. This thing here. So this is the range around it that I can reach. There are other pieces of base worth blueprinting to share. I mean, not really. A lot of this base is pretty bad. All the circuit, like these green circuit builds and the blue circuit build up here, and then the red circuit builds, they're all ones I use in sending supporters to space, which are on my website, which is very outdated, but the builds are there. These were just modified for the train length for our 363s, but like the core of the build is the same build I use in sending supporters to space. One thing we could blueprint is my nuclear power build. It's actually a build that I made, and I like it quite a bit. So we could create a build, take a copy of this nuclear build. I'm going to minus the lasers, but we do need those pipes, so it's fairly evident that we need to... actually, Perhaps I should just take the whole thing, eh? And then clean it up, just to indicate that we need all the pumps for this. Get rid of lasers, get rid of the walls. I'm quite happy with my nuclear build. Why nuclear over solar in this build? Two reasons. The main reason for this playthrough in particular is since we started on an island and everything was water, we would have had to landfill an absurd amount of space to build 12 gigawatts worth of solar panel. Because, I mean, that's a ton of space, folks. And I was not about to landfill all the space required for those solar panels. But in general, also, I just didn't want to take the time to do it because still, 12 gigawatts of solar is quite a lot of solar. And even with bots, that's going to take a while to build them and place them. And I wanted just some fast power. So. It's like half of NA, right? Yeah, solar takes up a vastly, vastly larger amount of space than nuclear. Like, this is the potential for almost 20 gigawatts of power. I don't know how many solar panels you need for that. If someone wants to calculate that, go for it. But my guess is it would be like this entire island or something ridiculous for 20 gigawatts worth of solar power. Output on a solar panel is 60 kilowatts, which averages out, I believe, to 42 kilowatts. You want to base it on the average. The reason being that 60 is only at the, like, noon, basically, like the highest sunlight level in the game, which is obviously only for a very short period of time. So usually when you, like, build solar stuff, you calculate it for the average through the day, which I believe is 42 kilowatts. Yeah, so Bowen says, I have a solar field which produces around 15 gigawatts, is about the size of Xterm's whole base. So there you go. Basically, like I said, it would be like this entire thing of solar power. That's why I didn't build solar. So, you know, we go from this to basically the entire island or more of a solar field to produce the same amount of power. Now, obviously, it's basically non-existent as far as game performance is concerned. Whereas nuclear is, like, definitely a draw on game performance. Again, if that's, like, your main concern, then maybe you'd want to do solar. Which is why I did solar on my supporters map, because I needed every little tiny bit of game performance and UPS I could possibly get. There you go. So, electric calculated, 20 gigawatts of supply at 42 kilowatt average would be 476,191, basically 500,000 solar panels. Yeah, how many tiles of solar would it take? Yeah, solar is 3x3, accumulator is 2x2, I believe. Okay, so Shoop, our math brain, says it'd be 3.43 megawatts of power generation per chunk. Tiles just for the panels. Holy moly. Yeah, so a chunk is let me turn on chunk lines, tile grid. So this is a chunk. So in this amount of room you could generate about 3.4 megawatts of power. So you would need 100 of these to generate 340 megawatts, which is like still less than one of these, basically. Yeah, so one thing to mention, though, is that there are mods that add higher levels of solar panels, if you want to go modded. But in vanilla, that's kind of all we got to work with. Roughly 4.3 million tiles solar panels, neglecting accumulator substations. Exactly. Oh yeah, accumulators add a ton, for sure. Alright, so Shoop says we would need about 25% more than this range for 20 gigawatts of solar. So, yeah, that's a lot of solar. So basically, if you were to put the artillery in the middle, yeah, it would be like basically the whole island, like I said. Yeah. Oh, and don't forget the resources. You will suck several copper fields dry just making the dang things for all the circuits. Tingsu asks, what's the best type of Megabase to still have FPS in late games? Belt, bot, trains, bots, trains, only one. Well, probably UPS is what's actually going to be your limiter. Maybe both. Honestly, right now, like at this point, I can't give a solid answer. Aside from maybe just trains, although there's some issues, but probably just trains. A long time ago, I would have said bots without question. But belts have been optimized so much that they're actually really, really good, like efficiency wise. Honestly, even a combination of both can work well. And Geeson says something that's a good point. Anything without pipes, the least amount of pipes and fluid boxes, and this is a serious answer, the least amount of pipes and fluid boxes, the better. Compared to other stuff, I was thinking doing a card on belt type of base to solve UPS, FPS problems. My understanding is that cars on belts are really bad in large amounts. So I'm not sure that would really fix things. The issue with vehicles, whether used for storage chests themselves in place or on belts, is not the pathfinding, obviously, because the vehicles aren't driving. It's that vehicles never sleep, so they're always an active entity. Whereas, like inserters, when they're not working, they sleep, and then they're basically they're like not even counted, basically. So yeah, cars are just, and vehicles rather, are just always an active entity. It doesn't mean, like, to clarify, it doesn't mean that if you use cars that your game's just gonna like die and you're gonna go to like 10 UPS. But if you're looking to save UPS, like if you're in a situation where you need to save it, vehicles are probably not the way to go. So issues aside, what did you want to take away from this playthrough to future playthroughs? Things to take away through to future playthroughs are leave more space and plan better. Those would be the two overarching lessons. Leave more space and plan better. And I know those are very basic in general, but I guess to drill down on that a little more is don't rush things unless you have to. Like next playthrough, there may be some rushing because otherwise I'm going to die and lose. But, you know, if I just taken the time to plan this better and not been so rushed and impatient, I think things would have gone a lot smoother. All right. I think it's a good place to call it, guys. We've covered most of what we needed to. I very much look forward to next series. I hope we can start that here soon. I hope this was helpful and educational to everybody. There will be a clip together version of this on YouTube at some point. But thank you, everybody, so much for being here. I very much look forward to the next playthrough. Hope you do as well. Take care, everybody. Have a fantastic rest of your day. And I will see you all later. Bye-bye.